up, cucks? It's your boy, the hater, up in this mug. And it's Friday, which means SmackDown is tonight. Now, that's not what I want to talk about, but who wants to take bets that Cody Rhodes will come out in a suit and cut a boring-ass promo? That's what I think is going to happen up in this bitch. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, motherfucks, let's talk about the topic at hand. The sad state of wrestling, all right? Wrestling is obviously the worst it's ever been. Triple H is the worst thing to ever happen to wrestling in terms of booking and in terms of managing it. And quite frankly, I'm not going to listen to anybody say otherwise, right? We heard for years how when Vince goes away, things are going to get good. But obviously they haven't, and obviously they won't, right? It's a bunch of overproduced nonsense. And that's the topic of this video. Overproduced nonsense, right? So, if you had something good, right, you don't need to tell me that it's good. I'm smart enough to understand if something is good or not, right? It's as simple as that. You don't need a catchy entrance. You don't need, fireworks and pyro. All you need is someone to show you they're good. Here's a great example, right? Nowadays, people have these nostalgia goggles on up in this mug, and they say things like, oh my god, the Brood was so cool back in the day. Now, I remember back in the day, because I was around, motherfucks, and I was a big fan of the Brood, right? Obviously, Christian's my favorite wrestler. I always liked Gangrel, and I've always liked Edge too, right? Now, the Brood, despite me and 3 other people in science class liking them, the vast majority of the people didn't give a flying fuck about the Brood. And I don't blame them, right? The Brood was presented as being boring beyond the fact that they gave bloodbaths and had a cool entrance. But back then, that wasn't enough. You couldn't get over on a great entrance, right? Because everything was so much better that everybody, consequently, was so much more well-rounded. So, for example, let's take a look at The Rock. The Rock was 100 times more over than the Brood ever would have been, right? Now, The Rock had a very simple entrance music. He had a good song, an iconic song, but it really only became iconic because he became iconic, right? Like, if The Rock had been, Steve Blackman or something like that, right? Steve Blackman, who actually had a pretty good theme song as well, but if The Rock had been Steve Blackman, his theme song would have been as iconic as Steve Blackman's theme song. Everyone had a good theme song back then. With the Jim Johnston productions, everyone had a good theme song. Nobody had a shit theme song. Now everyone has horrible theme songs, but more on that a little bit later because we're talking about overproduction, right? So it's like you start thinking about these things and you start piecing it together. You're like, oh, well, when everything sucks ass and they want something to stand out, they're going to overproduce it, right? That's what happened with Cody Rhodes, right? Cody Rhodes has this overproduced entrance where it's like he's got his own theme song, and the theme song is about his life. It took my name away, but I want my freedom. Shut the fuck up, you know what I'm saying? Shut your bitch ass up, I don't want to hear this garbage, right? Every week in AEW when it started, he would do some overproduced hacky shit like break a throne and cut a boring ass promo. And for some reason, obviously Vince McMahon was like, oh, this is stupid as fuck. But, this kid's got something going for him. Maybe we'll take him. Triple H was like, give me Cody. I'm going to make him a champ. Shut up, cuck. Shut up, triple cuck. You know what I'm saying? Now, insofar as all the overproduced garbage goes, right, you see where the logical conclusion is, right? In order to make Cody Rhodes' otherwise mid-ass theme song get over, everyone else has to have a shit theme, right? And this is something that we've noticed. Every person's theme starts out with someone, usually the person themselves, saying their shit catchphrase, or it'll be something like a sound that's associated with them, or typically, and I think most often, it'll just be their name, right? I noticed this recently, Ricochet's theme song. Remember the theme song when it would start? The theme song would start, and you would hear basically a bullet, Ricochet. You hear choo 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 choo, and you're like, oh shit, it's Ricochet because I just heard the sound of a ricochet. You know what I'm saying? That's how it was back then up in this bitch, right? And back then I mean now, basically, right? Then you have all these other jobbers, right, that started having their theme song just be basically something that primes the audience into realizing it's them. You know? But because everyone is so shit and nobody knows the difference, between Axiom and Pete Dunne, nobody knows who the fuck these guys are, really, right? Nobody really gives a flying fuck. You have to, like, make these distinctions, like, very, very clear, but almost to the point of being not clear anymore from the fucking entrance music, right? So, the first time I noticed it was, like, when Mandy Rose went back to NXT, and her theme song was Mandy, right? And it was like, and then she would come out, and you're like, oh, like, what? Why is her name being said, right? And then I'm like, okay, that's weird, but I thought it was a one-off. Then I got thinking, I'm like, oh, I remember another jobber that had this in their theme song, but their theme song was iconic. Chavo Guerrero, remember the Chavo Guerrero? Ooh, Chavo, dun dun dun, dun dun dun. That was a sick theme, right? But that's because Chavo Guerrero had to be differentiated because he was just boring, right? So they were like, oh, we're gonna give him like some Hispanic-y music, and so people don't confuse him with one of our other 35 Hispanic wrestlers who have no personality. We're gonna say ooh Chavo in the beginning, right? And this kind of became a staple, right? We also had Gregory Helms, and like, but nowadays it seems like everybody has this, right? Like you have Braun Strowman, it's like Braun, New Day. It's a new day, yes it is, right? The Usos, Oos, like it's just me, Oos, everything. Every person's theme song is basically just a restatement of their catchphrase or their name. It feels like we're in fucking Pokemon up in this bitch, Like if Politoed had a theme song, it'd be like Politoed, like every fucking Pokemon would have that. You'd be like Bulbasaur, or maybe ooh Bulbasaur, and then Bulbasaur comes out in like a poncho or something, dressed like Chavo Guerrero up in this bitch, So that's the problem, right? The overproduced garbage makes it so that people do not need to get over on their own, right? There's no need for me to convince you to watch, right? During the entrance music, right, wrestlers used to like do part of their performance, right? So like, for example, the best example that I can think of, in my opinion, is probably Triple H or Stone Cold. I mean, obviously The Undertaker and stuff like that, but let's look at Stone Cold, right? Like the glass would shatter and he would just arrogantly walk to the ring, like he'd pretty much do the Vince McMahon walk almost, right? And then he would ignore everything else that's happening. Maybe he'd stare someone down a little bit and he'd climb at every corner and raise up the middle fingers and just like cheer to the fans, right? Obviously, The Rock would have like the iconic entrance and he would come out. And if he had the belt, he would do it with the belt. Or otherwise, he would raise his fist in the air in the corner, right? These are iconic wrestling things. Triple H, obviously, he had like, a very produced, not overproduced, entrance, right? Where he like walks to the beat of the song and he like spits the water, right? And then he says, I'm the game, whatever, right? So that's kind of the idea here, We've had this for a long time, but now it's getting to the point where it's like, like let's say you have like Bobby Lashley come out, right? He just comes out. Like he doesn't do anything, right? Now he started doing the little like fist pump thing that he does to the beat of his song, but that's about it. Everybody else doesn't do anything. So once in a while, right, when like a team like the Street Profits comes along, people are like, wow, they're so charismatic, right? They just completely misplaced the word charisma just because like they actually do something during their entrance music. But this is not an indicator of Street Profits having charisma. It's an indicator of wrestlers having no personality overall, so that this thing, in comparison, because it's a bit overproduced, turns into something amazing, right? And the worst example that I can think of is, of course, Karrion Kross, right? Not so much anymore because, quite frankly, now they're like, oh, it's not worth it, right? But when he was starting out, he had the most overproduced entrance of all time. You can go back and look at my Karrion Kross videos, some of my favorite videos of all time. But the Karrion Kross videos, right, were my favorite to make because, quite frankly, I felt like Karrion Kross was going to go downhill like he did. And I never understood why they would overproduce the entrance of this jobber, right? Because he's boring, right? Him and Scarlett Bordeaux are both boring motherfuckers. Like, it's like, I mean, I have a feeling that if I were to hang out and get a coffee with them, I'd be like, oh, I can't wait till I fucking get home so I don't have to talk to these bores. That's the impression that I get because they would do boring people shit. They'd walk to the ring and make funny faces and say, fall and pray. And I'm like, oh, shut up. Like, this guy's not cool enough for this. He can't pull this off. But anyways, it doesn't matter, right? The point I'm trying to make is that this overproduction, right, is usually used to set someone apart. It's used to give the impression that this person is different than everybody else, right? That this guy, that Karrion Kross, is more important than Mustafa Ali, right? Which might be true, but the idea is you still have to work on Mustafa Ali's entrance too, right? That cannot be just like Mustafa, da-da-da, da-da-da-da, or whatever the fuck it was. It probably wasn't that, but would you be surprised if that was his entrance music? Now every theme song just starts out with this is the part that bothers me, right? It starts out with words, right? Not even a song. It starts out with words that are supposed to tell you who's coming down the aisle, right? So like even Liv Morgan, she has a little laugh like, and then it's like ding ding ding, like it's like you're primed to just register that intro to Liv Morgan, right? But there's no actual music that corresponds to her, right? Using the Brood's theme song as a great example, right? The Brood's theme song, I saw a comment last night in some YouTube video. It was like one of those edge clips with Chris Van Vliet, where someone said, they're like, this is the brilliance of Jim Johnson, right? Like, you could take something like a theme like the Brood's theme and make it amazing and iconic, right? And you do that simply by having the music be badass and clearly indicate that these people are coming. Like, if you saw the Brood backstage and then you saw the APA, not the Acolytes, but the APA backstage, right? And you had like both their theme songs, you could easily match which one corresponds to which one, right? Because there's something to it. Like, you're like, oh, this sounds like music that vampires would used to come out to, right? And then, the APA theme song, you'd be like, this sounds like music that badasses would come out to, right? But that's kind of the problem. If you have generic theme songs, and some people had generic theme songs, like the Dudley Boys, for example, right? But if you have generic theme songs, right? And I don't know the difference between fucking, Axiom and Javon, whatever, Evans, right? Then it's like, why do I care about Javon Evans and Axiom, right? Why the fuck am I going to care about people that you don't care about? And this is kind of like my whole thing with Trick Williams, right? This is my whole thing with Trick Williams. It's like his theme song, right, is what got him over. Like, there's nothing else there, right? And as we've seen before, this doesn't work, motherfuckers.